Okay. So thank you everyone for coming out to today's session on Social Security as part of the Delaware Library's workshop series. Today's presenter is John Whitelaw, a lawyer from Delaware Community Legal Aid Society, which provides free civil legal advice to qualifying individuals. So John, I'm going to let you take it away.
Thank you so much, Caitlin. Good evening, Mr. Dugas and Ms. Foster, and I'm going to call you Brian and Kelly for now. And you please feel free to call me John. I am an attorney at Legal Aid in Delaware. I want to tell you a little bit about who we are, and then we're going to spend the next 45 minutes talking about Social Security and SSI. And please feel free to ask questions or raise your hand as we're going on. But don't be asking about sort of really personal individual things. It's not about, and I don't want you to have to reveal deeply personal information about yourself. That's not what this is about. But if you've got questions about the process and how it works and the benefits, you should feel free to interrupt and either raise your hand using the raise your hand function, which I think we have, or type it in or interrupt, and then we'll keep Caitlin on her toes for stopping the recording so that you're not necessarily picked up on that. I want to give you some, this is my contact information as well, including my phone number. I wanted to give you just some overall numbers so that folks can understand how important Social Security and SSI benefits are nationally. There are almost 70 million people in the country who get Social Security and SSI. That is a lot of people. The population in the United States is about 330 million. So it's a little more than 20% of the population gets Social Security SSI. Of those people, 50 million plus are over 65. So you hear in the press, and a lot of the bad press about Social Security is about the disability program. The disability program is a relatively small component of Social Security. The vast majority of money that is paid out in retirement benefits. That is the real sort of, by far, the biggest part of the administration. And I will tell you, for the most part, people never have a problem, right? People, they retire, they collect their money, they get their checks every month. But the problem is, even if the error rate is only 1%, that's still almost 700,000 people with problems every year. And so you can see, because it's such a huge agency, even a small error percentage results in, and their error percentage is way higher than 1%. So there are hundreds and hundreds of thousands of mistakes that get made. I'm not going to say every day, but probably every day. To give you some idea of the amount, it is relatively low. The average beneficial amount throughout the country for everybody is $1,400. Retired workers, it's a little higher, and disabled workers, it's a little lower. And that makes sense, because the amount you get is based on how much you pay in. And if you're able to work through retirement, you've paid more in, so you often will pay a little bit more. Disabled workers stop working because they can't work anymore, and so they often, on average, get a little bit less. But I think this is just a useful number so that you can see that the average payment amount is really not that high in the big scheme of things. If this is your retirement, you are living at the margin. So for a retired worker, that's $18,000 a year, basically. That is not a lot of money to live on. Something else that people don't understand is there are other people who can get benefits on a Social Security account. So typically what happens, and we'll probably go into this in a little more detail, is you pay in, right? You're working, and if you get a paycheck, there's that little line that says FICA. That is the Social Security taxes. And what you are doing is, in essence, is you are buying government insurance. Now, it's not, and it's like any other insurance, it's got rules. Now, it's not voluntary, you have to pay it if you're working, but it really is an insurance program. And it provides insurance to you if you die, to your dependents, if you retire, or if you become disabled, which is why it's sometimes called retirement, survivors, and disability insurance, RSDI. Dependents and survivors, who are they? So when you pay in, the government creates several accounts. Now, you don't get more if you're single, and you don't get less if you're not. And you don't pay any more or less in, but they create accounts so that children, if you are a worker who retires, or if you die, or if you become disabled, your children can collect money based upon your work record. who is this? Children under 18 or 19 if still in high school, or if they're over 18 and disabled, then they can also keep collecting. Spouses, and this is one that people don't have forgotten about. If you have a couple and one of them hasn't worked, when the person who has worked retires, the non-working spouse at age 62 collect an additional check on the worker's account. I'll give you an example. My parents come from a traditional family in the sense that my father worked and my mother stayed home and did not work. So when my father retired, and I'm just going to make up a number to so what he would get, he gets his $1,200 a month, and my mother can also collect $600. Now that doesn't reduce the amount my dad gets, and if my mother isn't there, he doesn't get any more. But there's money for a spouse, so those are spouses' money. There's also widows and widowers. So when the wage earner passes away or dies, the widow or widower, depending on the gender, can collect on the deceased wage earner's record. And you either have to be 50 and disabled or 60. And then also one that we love, divorced spouses. And it's fun because you get to collect on your divorced spouse after if you've been married. You have to have a 10-year marriage. And it's sometimes fun to tell people that this long ago spouse that they've forgotten about and who was abusive or mean or nasty, you can actually collect money on their account later on. Doesn't hurt them, but it's money for you. And this is just an example to show in sort of generalistic terms that there are other people on your account who can collect benefits on your account. But we'll go to the next slide. Well, we'll try and go to the next slide. There we go. The other program that we need to talk about is SSI, Supplemental Security Income. SSI is benefits for people who haven't worked enough to collect Social Security. It's a relatively small program. It's about 8 million people collecting, a quarter of whom are over 65. A little over half are between the age of 18 and 64, and then there's about 1 million children with disabilities. And so this is a program for people who are either disabled under Social Security's rules or 65, and who meet certain requirements about being low income and resourced, and we'll talk about that in a minute. It's not enough to be disabled or elderly to collect SSI. You have to be poor, as they define it, and that's really very low income and very low resource. So this is a minimal, relatively speaking, minimal cash program for people who haven't paid enough in and who are elderly or disabled. And we'll talk in a minute about how much the amount. Here's the amount: $794 for a single person and $1,191 for a couple. So a couple is a married couple, regardless of gender. And you'll know that a couple's check is not twice an individual's check; it's exactly 1.5 times. There's a marriage penalty. So if Caitlin and I are married, sorry, Caitlin, I do this to you every time. If Caitlin and I are married and we're both, say, 65 and don't have any other income and we don't have any resources, we can get $1,191 between us. They'll cut us a check each for half of that, which is 500 and whatever. It's 550, 550, something like that. If, on the other hand, we're not married and we're not a couple, but we just happen to be living together as roommates, we could each get $794. So there's a penalty in this sense for being married. And then the other thing about SSI is, in addition to all of the extra rules about not having other income and resources, is there's no other benefits for members of the family. So if I'm on SSI, my dependents don't get money. It's an individual check, and there are no benefits that flow to anybody else. Unlike when we talked about Social Security, where possibly children, spouses, widowers, and so forth, there are other family members who can get benefits. On SSI, no benefits for other family members. It's all individual entitlement, and you have to meet these other little rules, which we'll talk about in a minute. How do you apply? Very important to know. And again, this is pre-COVID. I mean, so you obviously are not going to the office in person today to apply because the office is not open. They have very limited appointments, and I'm not going to sort of talk about what they've done for COVID at the moment. Sort of generally speaking, in person, online, or using this toll-free number. I want to give you a warning about this toll-free number, and it's the only thing you should ever use it for is to start a case, and then you should throw it away. If you are getting benefits, and you have a problem with your case or you want to find something out, do not use this number because they're useless. These people are terrible. It's not your local office, and they really don't know what they're talking about, and it's just not worth it. It's not worth it. You need to call your local Social Security office. If you're getting benefits and you're having issues, you've got to call the local office. Calling this number is just a flat not useful. It is, however, useful to start a case. You call them and say, I want to apply, and they'll send you the paperwork and you fill out an application. For some benefits, you can apply online, particularly, Social Security retirement, but not SSI. I think I have a little chart here about what you can apply online for and what you can't apply online for. RRB, people might wonder, what is that? That is a very unusual benefit. It's called Railroad Retirement Benefits. There used to be a whole separate system of benefits for people who work for railroads. I put it up there because once in a blue moon, you will find someone who gets railroad retirement benefits. I actually have a client who gets railroad retirement benefits, but it's pretty uncommon, and you have to apply in person. Can you apply online? Yes, Social Security, disability, retirement, spousal, or Medicare. SSI, no. Dependents benefits, and survivors benefits, and widowers, no. There's a paper application. It's a painful process. They're a bureaucracy, like every other big organization. They have some wonderful people, and they absolutely do. They have some horrible people for sure. And then they have a bunch of people who are neither good nor terrible. I will tell you what their single biggest problem is. Their single biggest problem's got nothing to do with how good their people are. Their single biggest problem is they don't have enough of them. That is not their fault. But you as a customer or a consumer or a client or me as an advocate, we bear the brunt of this because they are grossly understaffed. They have more work to do each day than they can possibly do. So they get more paper coming in the front door than they can press out the back door. Why? And that's because Congress has starved them. And so there's not enough money in the budget each year for them to get benefits. For them to do the work they need to do. It's a terrible thing, and it's no excuse, but it is sort of what really happens. Okay, what are Social Security benefits so that folks have some understanding of that? It's all part of the Social Security Act, and the Social Security Act is broad. It's like a book, right? And it's broken into different chapters or titles. And there's nothing fancy about that, but it sort of helps you to break down to think about it this way. Title II benefits are what we think of as Social Security benefits. Of course, they use Roman numbers. They won't use the 1 and the 2 like we used to see, and they use Roman numbers because Congress likes to make things difficult. And I think I said this earlier. It is an insurance program for workers and family members who've paid in enough to be covered. There's retirement, and then there's survivors or dependents, and then there's disability. The only difference between survivors and dependents is whether the wage earner is alive or deceased. If I'm alive and I've retired and I have dependents, they're dependents. If I die, they're survivors. That's why we lump them together. And then there's retirement and disability is the two substantive parts of the program. Like any insurance program, you got to be covered. Unlike car insurance, the day you start work does not get you covered. So, you hear these ads on the TV, get covered instantly, send in your first payment, and you will be insured to drive your car. Well, that may work for car insurance. It does not work for Social Security insurance. So you start your job, you've never worked before, you make your paycheck and you pay. That does not mean you're covered. You have to work a certain amount in order to get covered. And the general rule is 10 years. So you're not going to be insured for retirement until you've worked for 10 years. That's a long time. It's 40 quarters, 10 years. And to get disability, it has to be 5 out of the last 10. Now, if you become disabled at a younger age, you don't have to work for 15 years. You can work for less. And so if I've been working, I'm 25 and I've been working for several years, I may well be insured for disability in as little as 2 years. But there is, you've got to pay in a certain amount until you get eligible, and it's not just when you start work. There's a length of time. Now, Social Security doesn't screw this up, right? This is something that so long as your wages are reported, they're gonna, they add them up, and they almost always get that right. It is one of the downsides of working under the table. You work under the table, you're not paying Social Security taxes, so you don't get credit. If you're not paying Social Security taxes, you are not getting credit and so it's not going to count, right? So it has to be over the table. You have to be either paying Social Security taxes out of FICA, or if you're self-employed, you pay them as self-employment taxes, right? Where you pay both shares of FICA, which ends up being about 13%. But you got to pay in to be covered. And one of the disadvantage of working under the table is that you're not getting, it doesn't count, right? So you're not going to get Social Security for that because you're not getting credit with the work. All right. Retirement can be complicated, and there's a couple of terms that you need to understand. And if you forget them, it doesn't matter. You just need to understand the concept. So I'll tell you what they are and then explain why they matter. Full retirement age, right? What is that? That's the age when you can retire and not get penalized for retiring early. Historically, it was 65. It's moving towards 67 for folks. And for more people who are retiring now, depending on what year they were born, it's between 66 and 67. For those of you, depending on how old you are, if you're, even for me, I'm in my late 50s, my retirement age is 67. So that's Congress always mess with this, and there are always these proposals to push it out so that you have to work longer until your full retirement age. But as we sit here today, for almost everybody, it's between 65 and 67. All right. This slide we talked a little bit about, but I want to have it here in mind. This is, what is SSI? SSI is a needs-based program. Some call it a welfare program, but that has bad connotations. It shouldn't have bad connotations. It just means you're financially needy, but it's a public benefit program for people who are very low income and very low resource. You get SSI, and we talked about this before. I'll just mention it again here. You got to either be disabled or 65. You got to have very low income and very low assets and resources. And there are also citizenship and criminal justice issues. What do I mean by that? If you're not a US citizen, there are some strict limits on whether you can get SSI. And if you have criminal justice involvement, for example, if you are incarcerated or some other things, you can't get SSI either. Don't want to go into the details of that today, but just want to let you know that that's just another part of SSI. Disability. The definition, which I'm not, you can read it. It's a technical definition. It's the same definition for both. A couple of things to know about it. One is temporary disabilities will not get you Social Security. But if I break my legs and I'm going to be laid up for 3 months, but I'm expected to be fine in 6 months, I'm never getting Social Security for that. Because why? It's not expected to last 12 months. You don't have to wait 12 months. So, if they amputate my legs, well, I'm going to be, they're not coming back. So that's, I don't have to wait till 12 months after that. But the disability has to be expected to last 12 months or result in death, right? So if you have really serious health problems that are very serious, resulting in death is another one. It can be anything. People ask me all the time, well, can I get disability based upon, and then they'll list something. Heart disease, yes. Arthritis, yes. Back problems, yes. Diabetes, yes. But that doesn't really tell you anything, right? It's not a question of what is the label of your disability, it's how bad is it. Not everybody, just because you have a heart problem does not mean you get disability. Just because you have asthma does not mean you get disability. It all depends on how much it affects you. How limiting is it? How serious is it? How does it stop you from working? Merely having the diagnosis, that and 50 cents will get you half a cup of coffee. The diagnosis alone does not get you disability. It is a very rigorous and difficult process. They turn people down left and right. So it can be a physical problem, and it can be a mental problem, and it can be a combination of the two. Can I get disability because of this depression, anxiety, schizophrenia? And yes, the answer is yes. But again, it's not the diagnosis, right? It's how severe is the problem. How much does it affect you? What do your medical records say about how well you can function, both physically and mentally? And then, Social Security goes through this process of evaluating you. And I'll talk a little bit about what to do if they turn you down. And again, I would also note that just because your doctor says you're disabled, they don't necessarily have to accept what your doctor says. They have to look at what your doctor says, But, the doctor says, John Whitelaw is disabled. It's like, so she says, oh, that's nice. We're going to make our own decision as to whether we think you're disabled. They can't they can't completely ignore what your doctor says, but they're not bound by it. The one thing you cannot get disability for is substance abuse. So if the reason you are disabled is substance abuse, you cannot get disability. Now, that doesn't mean if you have a substance abuse problem, you can't get disability. That just can't be the reason you are disabled. If you're disabled from something else and have substance abuse, absolutely you can get disability. So, for example, let's assume I have a really bad car accident, and I have 2 limbs amputated, and then subsequently I develop a substance abuse problem. I can get disability because I'm missing 2 limbs. It's got nothing to do with whether I'm using substances. So they have to separate out your impairments from the substance abuse. I wanted to there's a myth about substance abuse. There are 2 myths that go around about substance abuse. Myth number 1 is if you have a substance abuse problem, you can never get disability. That is just not true. And then myth number 2 is, oh, they give disability to everyone who is an alcoholic or a drug addict, and that is just complete nonsense. They do not give you disability based upon your substance abuse. Okay, wanted to get that out of the way. This is important. This is important with respect to everything Social Security does. If they send you a nasty gram, dear Ms. McGee, you can walk and chew gum. You are not disabled. If you disagree with our decision, you have 60 days to file an appeal. I'll explain what I mean by 65 in a minute. Appeal, and get representation, particularly on the disability side. Lots of people who are disabled get denied, and they get denied more than once. Don't give up. Don't give up and get an attorney or get a representative. I'll talk a little bit about who does that work in a minute. Appeal now, think later. What's the process? You apply, then you get what's called an initial denial, and there's a paper appeal called reconsideration. Then your second appeal is you're asking for a hearing in front of a Social Security judge, administrative law judge. That's the first time you have to get to go see somebody. The other stuff's all on paper. They gather your medical records, look at them. They're supposed to look at them. Sometimes they'll send you to see one of their doctors for an examination, and then they write a decision that says, yay, you're disabled, or boo-hoo, you're not disabled. Lots of people win in front of judges because it's the first time anyone from Social Security has really laid eyes on you to decide. I will also tell folks, the Social Security local office does not make disability decisions. It's a different part of Social Security. It's actually a state agency that contracts with Social Security, but it's not the people in the field office. A lot of times clients get really mad at folks in the local Social Security office. They denied they did not do anything. They don't make disability decisions. They do all the other stuff, right? But they actually do not make Social Security disability decisions in local Social Security offices. There's nobody in those offices physically who decides if you're disabled. There's nobody in those offices who reviews your medical records to decide if you're disabled. That's handled somewhere else. So while we can be mad at them for things they do, they don't do that part of the job. They send it out to a different part of Social Security. So it's not the local people that do it. The most important place if you've been turned down is here. You absolutely want to try and get a lawyer for your hearing in front of a judge. Do you have to get a lawyer? No, nobody's going to make you get a lawyer, but it's just not a good idea to do it by yourself. Because you don't know the rules, you don't know what meets the rules, you don't know how to play the game. You really need to. And there are lots of private lawyers. We don't do a lot of these cases at this level. We do it when they're trying to take them away from you, or if there are other issues. There are lots of decent private lawyers who do this work. And you might say, well, I can't afford to pay a private lawyer because I don't have any benefits. And the answer is they don't make you pay up front. They only get paid if you win, and it's money that comes out of your back benefits, and it's totally worth it. You really should not be doing this work at the judge level without having a representative. And then so you sign an agreement, you retain a lawyer, they represent you at the hearing, and if you win, the money that they get paid out of your back money. They get a percentage of your back money up to a certain amount. You'll have a contract with them. It will say how much they get. And that's how that game works. I cannot stress enough how important it is to have a lawyer when you go in front of it. And then there's a couple of levels of appeal after that, but they're very esoteric. And it's really a long time. Like where the big, so I put this in red. Single most important part about getting benefits when you're fighting about disability is your hearing in front of an administrative lawyer. Okay. All right. Next, getting disability. It really is about paper. They need to see your medical records, and the more of them you've got, the better. And I also want to tell you, disabilities are you got to be a little bit twisted to be a good disability lawyer. And let me explain what I mean by that. Because the worse off the client's problem is, the better their case. So, the sicker they are, the more problems they have, the more difficulties they have, the worse it is, the stronger the case. Why? Disability. I often tell my clients that when they go in front of judges, they have to diss themselves. And they need to talk about everything negative. This is not about the half full glass. It's not about all the wonderful qualities you may have. It's about everything you can't do because of your medical problems, either physical or mental. This is not affirming work for the, it's terrible, right? You have to go in there and tell the judge everything you can't do. And you have to do it in a way that they don't think you're like faking and whining. And the most important way to do it is to have lots of medical records. You can't be telling the Social Security, and I'll just give you I'll make this up. So I'm disabled. I have terrible back pain. Mr. White, are you? No, I'm not seeing any doctors for my back pain. Doctors can't help me. It's like, that may be true, but you're not going to win a Social Security case unless you got paper. You've got to go. You've got to have medical records. You've got to have records. You've got to have treatment. You've got to show the Social Security Administration through paper what your disabilities are. And as I said, get a lawyer if you're denied. Get a lawyer if you're denied. There's lots of lawyers who do this work in Delaware and elsewhere. They're professionals, they're experts at what they do. You'll get a lawyer when you get denied. All right, want to talk a little bit about retirement as well. I'm going to stop talking about disability. Again, if someone wants to ask questions, just hit the chat box or raise your hand. Early retirement. Remember how at the beginning we talked about full retirement age, which is the age where you can retire and they don't punish you. You can retire as early as 62, but they punish you. What do I mean by punish you? You get less money, right? So the amount you pay in taxes determines how much money you get. And they calculate, again, we're going to pick on Caitlin. They calculate for Caitlin that her primary insurance amount is, say, $1,800. And so that's $1,800 if she retires at age 67. If she retires at 62, they're going to cut it because they punish you for taking it early, because she's going to get it for an extra 5 years and not going to pay you the same amount. So they reduce it by a fairly significant amount if you take it early. Now, sometimes you got to take it early. If you're 62 and you're not working, you got no income, you don't really have much of a choice, right? But you got to live. So that, there is a reduction in benefits. And there are also earnings limitations. Can you retire and still work a little bit? Yes, you can. You can retire and work a little bit, and I'm not going to go over those precise numbers. I counsel people on that all the time, and today is not the day to sort of work our way through those numbers. But you can work a little bit. But again, if you work over the limit, they punish you by reducing your benefit. So that's early retirement, right? The next one.
John, it looks like Brian may have a question for you.
Okay. You want to mute? You want to stop the recording so Brian can ask? The other, and I said this, can I retire and still work? Yes, and I'm not going to go into the precise amount of the earnings limitation. It's complicated. It depends on, there are different rules for when you first retire and then in your last year up to full retirement. I do counsel people on this individually. I have counseled people on this. Social Security actually has some good publications on how much can you work and still collect. It's not simple, but the short version is you can retire and still work, and there are limits before you reach full retirement age. And when you reach full retirement age, you can work as much as you like, and they don't care. I do want to mention one other thing about retirement, which I didn't put in here because I think it's fairly uncommon. Remember how we talked about they punish you if you retire before full retirement age? If you wait until after full retirement age, they reward you. So up to age 70, so between full retirement age, which is 67, and 70, you get an extra 8% for each year that you wait. So again, if you think you don't need it right away and you can afford to wait, you can wait till there's never any reason to wait till after 70, but between 67 and 70, for each year that you wait, they'll give you an 8% bump in addition to the cost of living increase. So that's why full retirement age is important. If you retire before, they punish you. If you wait till afterwards, they reward you. And if you do it at full retirement age, the amount you get is called the primary insurance now. All right. I do want to spend a little bit of time talking about overpayments, and then we can do any questions. This will take us about 45, which is probably good enough. What is an overpayment? An overpayment is when the Social Security Administration sends you a nastygram that says, "Dear John, dear Brian, dear Kelly, or dear Caitlin, we paid you too much money. We want it back tomorrow. Send us a check for $10,000. So Social Security often makes mistakes. Sometimes it's their fault. Sometimes it's your fault. Sometimes it's nobody's fault. Mistakes get made every single day of the week. And people get overpaid. What can you do about an overpayment? Two big things. You can challenge it. You can appeal it. There's a whole process because half the time they get it wrong, right? They said that I had a case just recently where they said to my client, "Dear client, you've been overpaid on your SSI because you had too many resources. You had 2 cars and that put you over the resource limit." Well, they were wrong because she was underwater on both cars, right? So she had no equity in either car. So she wasn't over the resource limit. They were just stupid, which is typical of Social Security. They make mistakes every day. So we filed an appeal of the overpayment. And we showed them that she owed money on both cars, so they weren't a resource. And so this is just one example, right? And so so we appealed the overpayment and we got, "Oh, we're sorry, you weren't overpaid. We were wrong." So you can always appeal an overpayment if you think they're wrong. And that's very individual depending on what they did. There are times when they are correct, right? I'll give you an example on the retirement side. You retire early, you work part-time, but you get the limit wrong and you work too much. So they only do this, they do it at the end of the year. But it turns out you send in your earnings and instead of only making 17,000, you made 19,000. And I'm making these numbers up. So that was $2,000 too much. So they're going to punish you, and so you owe them money. So, "Dear Brian, we overpaid you $7,000. We want send us a check." And let's assume they're right. You know what, Brian Brian was bad at math. He calculated what he was going to make wrong, and he made too much money, so he was overpaid. There's a process called a waiver. It's a technical term. It just means overpayments can be forgiven. It's completely separate from the merits, right? A waiver is, "Yeah, you know what, you're right. I was overpaid. You're right. You sent me too much money, but I shouldn't have to pay you back." It is a 2-part test, and you got to meet both parts. One is, can't be your fault. So it can't be, "Oh, I didn't tell them I was working because I knew they were going to tell me I was overpaid, and I didn't want them to find out." Of course, always find out. If you didn't do something and clearly that's your fault, right? On the other hand, let's assume you sent your pay stubs in every time and they just messed them up because they messed up all the time, or they lost it because they lose stuff all the time, or you told them and they said, "Oh yeah, you're fine," and then they recalculated. There are lots of reasons it might be your fault, and there's lots of reasons it might be their fault. If it's not your fault, and it would be a financial hardship to pay it back, you don't have to. But you got to meet both tests. So if you're Donald Trump and you got $10 million in the bank, even if it was their fault, you still have to pay it back. So it's not enough that it wasn't your fault. If you got money that you weren't supposed to get, it has to both be not your fault and a financial hardship. And how do you show that? You go through a monthly budget. You show them what your income is, you show them what your expenses are, and you show them you can't afford to pay it back. And that's there's a whole process for that. You can appeal it. You can do, there's all of that. But that is a waiver. So just because you were overpaid doesn't mean you always have to pay it back. This may be basic for you folks, but because some of the folks I work with, you got to open your mail from them, right? Ignoring letters from Social Security is a recipe for disaster. You've also got to tell them where you live. It used to be more important. Everybody told them where they lived and if they moved because they would get paper checks. Now, because almost all of the checks are deposited electronically, you don't tell them, you still get your checks, but you don't get the letter that tells you you need to do something. So you got to make sure Social Security has your current address. You got to open your mail and you got to deal with it. If they've sent you something nasty, our motto is appeal now and think later. You can always withdraw the appeal, but if you miss your deadline, it's a real problem. So appeal now. If it's close to the deadline, get the appeal in. You can always pull the appeal back if you later decide you don't want to do it. But if you miss your deadline, it's really hard to get that appeal going again, bring it back to life. Deadline means if you miss it, your appeal is dead. And you don't want to do that. You always, you want to have your, if they send you the nasty letter that says, "Dear Caitlin, we're cutting you off." You have the right to appeal, and you haven't been able to have a chance to talk to an advocate to sort this out. File the appeal, get it to them in writing. You can always pull it back later. But if you miss it, if you miss your deadline, I hate it when people, oh yeah, I got that letter and I knew it was wrong. Did you? No, I didn't appeal it. So why are you calling me 6 months later? It's like, no, appeal now, think later. When you deal with, why did I miss that one? Let's go. I'm not sure why here we go. There we go. I just went a little too far. Depending on what it is, they'll tell you, and they tell you this in the letter. They say 10 days, but there's always an extra 5 for mailing. 15, or if they tell you 60, it's 60 plus 5. So it's either 15 or 65. And that's the date you have to mail it to them. Don't just drop it in the mail. If you're going to mail it certified, because otherwise, when the US mail loses it and it doesn't get to them, you can't prove you sent it to them. And if you can't prove you sent it to them, you didn't send it to them. Or take it in person when they reopen and get a date stamped copy. But you got to prove that you file the appeal, because when they lose it, and they lose stuff every day, if you don't have proof, you didn't do it. That's why we say never use it's a little different during COVID because you might not have a choice. But other than that, people, well, I don't want to stand in line. It's like, no, I cannot tell you how many times stuff goes missing from the Dropbox. Not all the time, but it's just not worth it. Get a receipt and get a copy. You just have to do that. This is important. I get calls from clients that think they are being persecuted by Social Security. And once in a blue moon, that is true. Once in a blue moon, they are just being evil because someone's taken a dislike. But 99.9% of the time, it's got nothing to do with a worker thinking about Caitlin McGee. It's just they get stuff wrong all the time, but it's not because they hate Caitlin. It's not someone's in their little off cubicle thinking, "Ooh, how can we take Caitlin's benefits away from her?" No, that is just not how it. I am not saying they don't make mistakes all the time. They do make mistakes all the time. And these mistakes hurt people all the time. But I have rarely, if ever, and I've been doing this 30 years, you don't see cases where it's a personal thing. Yeah. I'm not telling you that couldn't happen, but it's so rare as to not be what people think that. It's mostly because if it doesn't fit neatly within the square little box, they don't know what to do with it. Or sometimes they lose papers, or they're too busy, or they don't know what they're doing, but it's very rarely a personal attempt to screw somebody. I'm not saying you shouldn't get upset about it. I'm not saying you don't do what you need to do, but it is almost never a personal attack. And even when they get stuff wrong, some of my clients say, well, they deliberately gave me the money so that they could take it back from me later. No, that's just not how it works. They don't know. You're not that important. They don't care. They made a mistake and now they want their money back. And yes, it's annoying, and we will, and there are things you can do, but it is not that they do not, as an agency, you don't do this just to poison people and just to sort of go after people. Do they make mistakes? Oh, God knows. Every day I deal with Social Security mistakes. Okay. I think, look at that. Oh yeah, don't wait. Now, don't call us for, if you apply and get denied based on disability, don't call us for that, because we don't do those cases. But the other stuff, they're trying to take it away from you. You've got an overpayment. They write you a nasty one. Dear Brian, we gave you benefits, but we want them back. Or dear Brian, we're cutting you off. Or dear Kelly, we paid you $10,000 too much. We want to check back in 30 days. Those are the sorts of things you should call us. Or we're reducing your check. And sometimes they just do and don't tell you, but those are the sort of things you should call us. And we can't do all of these cases, but we do a fair number of them. I usually have several of these going at once. My colleagues have them. If you're on benefits and they're trying to take them away, you should absolutely call us, because we do these cases all the time. If you're applying for disability benefits and you get turned down, get a private lawyer. There's lots of them. There's a number in Delaware you should be able to, and they'll take you. If you got a good case, they'll take it. Someone will take it. And it's totally worth paying to get a lawyer to do this case. I think it's 6:50. I think. Look at that. I'm done with my rattling and rambling on here for 50 minutes. If either Brian or Kelly have questions, I'd be happy to take questions. Perhaps we could stop recording for now so that folks can feel free to speak freely, because I'm done with my formal presentation. Does that work for you, Caitlin?
Yeah, I'll stop the recording now. There's also some other people on who may have questions as well.
Oh, I'm so sorry.